Hi, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us on another episode of our webinar series. This one is particularly special. I'm pretty excited about this one because this is a hot topic in the industry for most of us, which is AI. In particular, we're going to be talking about chatbots. And in specific, we're going to be talking about Bing Chat. Most of you have probably heard about Bing Chat and what that's meant for the industry and how that's come to power up, I would say, significantly the Bing proposition as a search engine and Microsoft in general. So this is going to be a pretty fun topic that we're going to be covering today. I have the honor to share the virtual stage once again with Mauricio Orantes, Director of Partner Development at Microsoft. So Mauricio, first of all, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Oh man, I always blush a little bit when you introduce me like that. But yeah, I think over the last few years, we've covered a lot of good topics from the very beginning of what the partnership looks like, the value prop of Microsoft Ads and what we're doing, and then now to be talking about ChatGPT integrated into the Microsoft platform. I'm just really excited that we're at a huge point for our business and for the search world.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure you've been getting a lot of questions from all of your partners in regards to what this partnership means, right, and what the product means for each one of us. That's what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to start sharing my screen. 1 second. I believe it should be shared. Can you please confirm that you can all see my screen? Yes. We're good.
I can see.
Perfect. Then we should be good. So what we're going to be covering today is we're going to do some intro in regards to chatbots, AI chatbots in particular, and how they work. I know it's a confusing topic as well because there's so much going on in regards to AI. If you use Twitter by any chance and you somehow let the algorithm know that you're into digital marketing, you're going to get 90% of what's going to show in your newsfeed is going to be our AI, the tools that you can use. So this is a very dense topic and it can get very confusing. We're going to talk a bit about chatbots in particular, what they mean, how they work, what powers them, some of the advantages and limitations of AI chatbots in general, and how they can actually impact productivity. And then we're going to get into Microsoft specific Bing Chat and what that means for all of us in the digital marketing industry, obviously for advertisers, but also for your users and the search engine world in general. So I'm going to get started with how chatbots work. And I think the first concept that we need to understand here is machine learning, which is basically what powers this engine when we talk about chatbots in particular. Machine learning is just computer systems that they're able to learn, adapt, and process the data that they're fed through any communication channel without necessarily having an explicit instruction. Back in the day, we've been used to what we used to call chatbots, which was basically an option tool where you would go in, you would type information, you would get options, you would select the options as answers, and then based on what you would select, you would get information back. When we introduce machine learning into the mix, then this particular system can actually interpret this information and make actual conclusions using their algorithms and the statistical models, and obviously analyzing the data that's coming through. It's a complex term because it involves a lot of things. It's not just a simple algorithm. There's a lot of deep learning into it, how information is classified, how neural networks work, how this type of system learns from itself, and how it improves over time. Because that's one key component about machine learning, that the more data that it receives and the more input that you see through the system, the more likely it is to learn from the information that it's receiving and improve itself. And that's probably the main difference that you have versus just an option chat where you would select information and then get specific results, versus something that's powered by machine learning that can understand what you're looking for, and at a certain level can even understand intent, or understand tone for that matter, and understand the buyer persona that's on the other side of the screen. So this is probably the main concept when we talk about chatbots. The way this has been integrated with chatbots is this powers the engine in a way that now when you start a conversation with this particular system, the interaction is completely different because the abilities of the chatbot are enhanced by machine learning. So now you're having conversations that are closer to seeming or feeling more human. And now the chatbots are also able to accommodate better for the user's needs. So you're getting more precise information, you're getting better results, and your interaction is also a lot more engaging than what we used to do 10 or 15 years ago. So this is really the main concept behind chatbots. And then another one that is very key or core to this particular subject is the natural language processing, which is really what we need to talk about when we talk about humanizing the particular chatbot term. This natural language processing is, when the machine learning technology is able to interpret and manipulate the human language, actually understand the human component behind what's being written, and then based on that provide an output that also seems or tries to seem as if it was human as well. So when you're talking about AI chatbots and you actually input information, now the answers that you're getting don't necessarily feel like they're coming from a computer. In a lot of cases, it feels like there's a person behind the screen answering, because the tone, the language use, the emojis, the jokes, they come through this natural language processing process, and that they're meant to make it more human. The idea with this is obviously make it more engaging, make the machine smarter as well. With natural language processing, what machine learning will do is they transform all the rules that they have about language and about human language, and they mix them with the algorithms to make sure that when they provide a solution to the problem, it makes sense. So these are the two core components. When we talk about chatbots, it's a pretty sticky subject because it's very technical, but at a larger scale of things, it's really what helps explain why there's a before and after when we talk about these particular technologies. The screen, what you can see is basically when we talk about Bing Chat, kind of how this workflow works. The information comes in, then you have the Bing orchestrator that will use the ChatGPT powered engine in the backend to, process the information. We'll put that together with Bing's unique database and data sources. And then using machine learning and the natural language processing systems, it will provide a context or an answer. So when we put all of that together, we get what a chatbot looks like. And Mauricio, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically how the backend of Bing Chat would look like, right?
There's a couple of details that are missing, but I think from
of course, I'm not going to ask you for all the secret sauce, right?
Yeah, look, I think what the core components here that we want to highlight are some of the pieces that you mentioned, right? Like the entry points of information, the signals that we've baked into the technology and are leveraging as well from the ChatGPT component, and then making that all sort of like into a beautiful sort of cosmic ballet, I guess, right? And then again, it's supposed to produce something out there for you, right? So it's constantly learning, right? It's not all knowing, and it's continuing to grow, right? And I think that's one of the caveats that the technology, like anything else, is only going to be as good as much as we participate and are also looking at challenging it to, be inclusive of other factors as well, right? So yeah, this is a great representation. I think if you were speaking to a larger crowd, a classroom, my parents, and even having a conversation at a bar, this would be good.
Yeah, no, and I think one important point that you mentioned is, apart from the fact that this is all very early stage, so there's a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot of fine tuning that's happening in the back end. There's a core component to every chatbot that's tied to the specific business logic and the specific data set that powers it. So even though chatbots, they all rely on machine learning, they all have the particular set of tools and rules that, get them through. So just because they follow the same process, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same answer or that the quality of the outcome is going to be the same. And when we get into Bing Chat in particular, we're going to see why it's different from maybe ChatGPT as a standalone or any other chatbots, because the business logic part of things is very important as well. When we talk about security, how reliable answers are when you talk to a chatbot, the quality of the information, basically everything that happens in the backend to make sure that the experience for users is relevant. So it's a very important subject, very interesting as well, because this really will be a game changer for most people. And when we talk about chatbots, there's a lot of things that come to mind when we, the advantages or potential advantages that we have. If we talk about, the private sector and actually including chatbots, within your website or your particular app, there's a lot of things that will give added value to you and your customers. It can actually help you improve, overall conversion rates, engagement, and revenue. If you have an AI chatbot working on your website, or if you're relying on an AI chatbot to get information, there's a lot of things that you can probably do that weren't able to do before if you relied on human interaction. It can be a lot more engaging because you get immediate answers. It's a 24/7 thing. So you have someone visiting your website and they're looking for an answer outside of working hours, having a chatbot that can actually process that information and get an answer in real time, it's a game changer, because it means that you're able to capture leads outside of maybe what you usually would. You know, it can identify buyer personas. It can make the experience a lot more engaging as well. And also in terms of data, you know, you can collect more data, you can analyze what's coming in, you can even A/B test things. You know, I've seen websites where you go in, and if you open two different windows, maybe even two different browsers, you can ask the same question, you'll get different answers because they're A/B testing answers based on the buyer persona that they think is coming from the different browsers. So it's a very interesting world in terms of helping with the acquisition funnel, helping with the engagement and the relationship that you can have with potential users. And overall is something that can give a lot of added value to your buyer funnel and your customers in general. So that's why it's so important to understand what they are and how they can be used. And if we talk about search engines in particular, how that can really revolutionize and change the way people look for information, because we're used to something very transactional, which is I ask a question and you give me an answer. Now we're talking about I start a conversation, then you can keep up the conversation with me. And it's a very different game when you talk about conversations versus questions, because there's a lot more information that can come in between. So it's important to understand that as well and what comes with it. Obviously, this comes with challenges, especially early stage challenges. One of them is security, obviously making sure that information is secure, that information is reliable, that if a chatbot is collecting information from users, that information is stored safely, particularly if it's sensitive information. The other challenges that you have is that as the chatbot learns, you know, to understand tone, to understand humor, it's going to make mistakes. So sometimes you're talking to a chatbot and it doesn't sound that human anymore, or it makes a joke that doesn't land well, or it doesn't really understand your tone or who you are. So the machine isn't 100% perfect yet. And at a very early stage, we're seeing some of these things happen over and over again. And in general, just allowing the machine to adapt to different languages and different personas is extremely hard. So in some cases, you are going to see that they don't really understand what you're asking, or the answer isn't as relevant. So these are challenges that we're seeing right now. But, you know, Mauricio and I were discussing this off camera earlier today. We are seeing the worst version of these systems, you know, so whatever we're seeing as a challenge now is probably what's going to be the worst that we're ever going to see. So I don't have as many insights as you do, Mauricio, into the future, but I'm pretty sure you already have an idea of how much this is going to grow and how it's going to improve in a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, my crystal ball is very limited, but I would say to caveat, we're seeing like the most infant version, right? I want to say that, and I think largely just because we're starting to understand like how this is going to supercharge our behaviors. I think that last slide you showed was awesome, right? You basically gave us a blueprint of how business operates. But when you apply the AI piece component, it is supercharging a lot of that, a lot of those components, right, that we run on our day-to-day. We as humans need to rest, we need to recharge, right? And so how do we, you know, invent the 25th hour, or how do we use something to help us sort of create more efficiencies during our day? And so I think those are the cool business rules that we're going to start to see with industry. And we'll talk a little bit more about how Microsoft is integrating this in both like the Microsoft product and other tools, and to create a lot more efficiencies to support you to get, you know, to ultimately be more productive at what you're trying to accomplish, right? You know, so we'll talk more a little bit of what the R&D crystal ball has to say, but yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Yes, and I mean, if you think of, you know, what this used to look like 30 days ago or even 60 days ago, the changes, it's just exponential. It's crazy. So it really is something that comes off extremely exciting, because there's so many good things and so many use cases that we've seen, and so much, you know, the increase in terms of level of engagement is so big that it really changes the game if you're trying to connect to customers, or you're talking about your buyer funnel or how you advertise. And that's why we think it's extremely important to understand the opportunities and make sure that you're capitalizing on them. If you're talking about, you know, productivity, we talked about all these things, why it's so important to have it at hand so you can, you know, leverage it for your business. But also when you think in terms of a search engine, chatbots make it a lot more engaging for users to actually search for information, because again, right now you're just asking a question. Sometimes you get the right answer, sometimes you don't. You still have to, you know, click 4 or 5 times to maybe check the first couple of websites to see if the information is relevant. Sometimes the question that you asked didn't have enough context, so the information, you know, even though it might be accurate, it's not necessarily what you're looking for. But when you put this into the mix, it becomes a lot more engaging. And if it becomes a lot more engaging in terms of business and user experience, it just becomes so much better. Communication is easier. You can resolve any complaint quicker. The answers are a lot more detailed. You can ask more complex questions. You get instant answers to questions that are not necessarily that easy to reply. So overall, it's such a huge boost in terms of productivity and what a business can do with them, that it's a significant element that you need to keep into account if you have a digital marketing strategy, if you have a digital presence, if you're thinking of your customers and how they look for information. This is key information that you need to have at hand. And when we talk about customer service, it's the same thing. It's whether we think of it as Bing's customer service and how this serves the searchers better, or you as a business and you integrating a particular chatbot into your business. It's a very customer-centric experience. You're trying to make it better for them and how they find information about you and your website. And the easier you make it to find information, especially for our generation, who's used to finding information in a second, then the better the results are going to be. And if you can engage them in conversation, you might get results that you weren't even getting in the past. Someone might come in looking for something, and through conversation, they end up purchasing or looking for something else that they weren't even looking for in the first place, but that will be relevant for them because the machine can understand that and guide them in that direction. And that's what's important about these chatbots and understanding their role in the buyer funnel, that whether you introduce them at the beginning or at the end, they can really shape which direction the customer can take and guide them through the best particular path in regards to information, and how fast they find information, how reliable it is, and overall what their experience feels like with search engines as well. So I think this is huge in general in terms of the overall digital marketing industry, because we are seeing people that are leaning towards different sources of information now, and now the ChatGPT is out as well, which I think is the big player here. A lot of people are relying on ChatGPT instead of maybe Yelp, or instead of even Reddit for that matter, or Google or Microsoft, right? Because they figure that the machine can probably gather information from all different places, curate it, and show the best case scenario possible. And in some cases, that might be the case. Again, it really depends where the information is pulled. But the idea that people are now thinking in those terms when looking for information means that we have to change the game as well. So now if we're providing sources of information, we have to make the experience as close to that as possible, because that's where we're going. That's how the search behavior is evolving and what it means for customers. So in terms of decision making and what's better for your business, going towards these paths is likely going to get you better results with your customers, and also probably get them to engage a bit more with your business and whatever you're trying to get across the funnel as well. But to get to the meat and bones of the presentation and talk about Microsoft in particular, now we're going to be talking about Bing Chat. What is Bing Chat all about? How this came about? Why is this different from ChatGPT? What this means for advertisers. We're going to be covering all these topics. Mauricio, I'm going to let you take the first slide, which is just maybe walk us through how Bing Chat works. What is this answer engine versus search engine, and what's happening on your side of things, because I know this is also a big change for you guys at Microsoft as well. But how are you seeing things on your end? What is really this all about?
Yeah, no, thank you. And first off, thanks for the opportunity here. I think you set the stage very well. From like a very like a 101 to a business case. So if that was the appetizer, man, I hope I'm a big meal. So yeah, look, I think for us, this is huge. From a business standpoint, ChatGPT has definitely been one of the key partnerships that has actually got us in the news for all the right reasons. It speaks to the testament that Microsoft is in the business of partnerships, right? And finding the right partners out there who are doing things very well. And we want to make sure that we're right there at the forefront. We can't come up with all the ideas, right? And I think one of the things that we found is that with ChatGPT integrated with Microsoft Ads, with Microsoft, the Bing search engine, it's only going to supercharge us into new areas that we're just discovering, right? For us, the relationship's only been 10 weeks old, maybe 11 weeks old at this point, right? And when I try to compare this to something in the tangible world, think about it. When the Wright brothers took off in Kitty Hawk, they flew for 9 seconds. And, you know, fast forward 40 years, we had commercial flights. You know, we started flying across Atlantic, right? And so with technology, we can supercharge a lot of that, and we can fast track that in shorter times. So, you know, 40 years in sort of industrial, post-industrial age, technology, we can condense it to weeks, right? And so what this means is that this integration is going to sort of create a new level of engagement that is going to be, you know, largely around providing the right answer and context and more engagement. You mentioned this earlier, that when people are engaging with chatbots on their website, they're qualifying a little bit more. They're spending more time on their website, right? And so you're giving the machine the opportunity to learn a little bit more and engage better and provide a better experience for the next person, right? And so that's really what we want to do. You know, in the last few years, Microsoft's invested a lot of money in research and development across all their product suite. And you can see some of the subtle changes that have allowed people to, you know, embrace the products a lot more. And this is just one of those additional instances of us behaving that way.
And first of all, thank you for the context and the intro, and again, just sharing my thoughts here. I think this is just a huge step forward, and I'm glad you guys also spent the time and the resources to make, you know, to making this happen such an early stage, because, you know, even though it's very recent, it's also the very beginning. You know, it's we're not seeing this spread out that quickly in other search engines. So I think this is a huge step forward for you guys. One question that I hear a lot, and this is also obviously a core topic for the webinar, is what really is the relationship with ChatGPT, and what's the difference? Because some people confuse it. Some people think it's just ChatGPT is integrated into Bing. Other people think you guys just bought ChatGPT and that's how it works. You know, can you give us a brief description of what the difference is, and you know, how it works?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, ChatGPT still has a standalone product, and you can go to ChatGPT and use like, I think version 3, 3.5, and 4. For us, you know, we saw that this was a really strategic partnership, and Microsoft made the investment to you know, partner up closer and to leverage the technology there to supercharge more of our product, right? So it's a plugin right now that is basically, you know, using a lot of what's happening on our set of data set to provide a better experience, right? And so we just wanted to make sure that if we're going to partner with somebody to supercharge our product, it was the right one. And ChatGPT made sense, right? Obviously, the announcement got a lot, you know, further than where we are now in terms of it's not generally available to everyone. There was a small test group that we needed to make sure, you know, would give us the endpoints, would be willing to generate, you know, some results for us so that we can allow the system to learn. And, you know, we wanted to be meticulous about this, right? A couple of weeks ago, you could only ask it 5 questions. Now you're up to 20, right? What does that mean? It means that all the signals that people are putting in, all the prompts that people are requesting, the way they're, you know, searching for information or looking for answers, it's informing the system, right? And it's allowing us to fine tune these business practices and core, you know, principles that Microsoft relies on and champions, you know, to really strengthen the product, right? And so for us, we're seeing a lot of excitement. They're opening it up a little bit more, and you know, we'll see that there's a couple slides that I think we provided on how some people are engaging with finding what they're looking for when you compare it against how they behave on the traditional search engine, right? So it's a super exciting time. Satya said it best. You know, I can only repeat his words, and you know, if I were to quote anybody, I'd point somebody back to this. That again, you know, we're an answer engine, you know, and we want to make sure that we're sort of pushing the next level of search.
And one concept that you guys talked about, you know, when you talk about basically changing the mindset from search to answer engine, is basically being a co-pilot for the web. And I love that concept. And I think we have a slide. Let me see if it's the next one. Because this gives me the sense that now you're not alone in the experience of the search engine. So you're not coming in here and just trying to figure out yourself. And now somehow the machine is helping you navigate, you know, the answers and the information. And What does that mean in terms of, concept as a search engine for you guys? Does it mean that it's, now you're gearing towards an experience where, users are going to have more of a companion as they search, or what's the idea behind this term of being, the co-pilot for the web and just leading the experience when someone looks for particular information?
Yeah, I mean, I wish they brought back Clippy, in the form of ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, would you like to save your document, right?
Yeah.
I think what Microsoft is trying to do is, again, trying to empower every person on the planet to achieve more, but we also want to make sure that they're doing it, that the tools make sense for them, right? And it's universal, right? And so a lot of this stuff sometimes that we're baking in is designed to support you in what you're trying to accomplish, right? So the cool thing about the Copilot piece, it can do a lot, right? For the search component, I think the last image was a little pixelated, but we found that in the example that I had mentioned, some people in the traditional sense, on a search engine, Google or Bing, you would say, like, let's say your HVAC was broken. We would say HVAC repair near me, because you know that you don't need to fill this search engine with context anymore. You don't need to have a conversation with it. You know that more times than not, relevancy is going to be key here, keywords and proximity, right? And so those three factors, I think everybody is largely behaving that way when they're searching for something, and they're going to get the result like they want, right? And that's how we're playing the game. With the chat piece on Microsoft Bing, it's a little different. You can ask it like, hey, my HVAC is broken, what should I do? And it'll provide you a kind of list for the context you're giving it. They're like, are you somebody who is likely to repair this on your own, or are you looking for a professional? Here are the two options, right? And so without sort of extending more the conversation like a decision tree would, it's not yes, this and, right? It'll give you a lot of context, and based off of that, we're going to see that people are going to be starting to behave a little differently and more conversational with it, right? And so I think that we're going to see a longer tail kind of interaction with these things, right? And in order to synthesize some of that stuff, we're also going to be integrating tools that are going to allow you to email these people almost right away. It'll be a sidebar that allows you to plug in to your Outlook. It'll be something where we need to make the right integrations to make sense to get you what you need, right? And so just because we give you information, like, we should also provide you a way to sort of execute on that. With the ads component, that's another piece that we're actively integrating into that piece, right? We want to make sure that we are delivering on relevancy, that we're still building in core values that Microsoft stands on, and that we want to make sure that there's, again, non-biased response, right? That we want to make sure that what you're getting is relevant and it gives you a fair balance, like an auction would, right? So if somebody is looking for an HVAC repair person near them, that they have an option that's presented to them, either to do it for themselves, an option to hire a professional, and what does that look like in terms of the field that's local to them, right? And so we'd want to make sure that it's as robust as it can be for someone to make an informed decision, and also a relevant decision, and like a equal decision, right? To look at the options and weigh them out as much as they could.
And I think one core component behind this particular train of thought is just making the experience better for users. I know that there is, customer centricity is really, I think, what's driving this change for you guys, because the more I read about, what the idea is and what you guys are looking for in terms of the outcome of the chat and what it can do for users, is making it better, just at its core, making the experience better. And that comes with everything else. So you're not trying to sell more. I'm trying to get more engagement, make it better for you. And I know that that's going to lead to something better, which can be, accessing more information, having more access to advertisers, having more access to different things that you didn't have before, spark creativity, etc. So as long as we keep that in mind, I think that drives the right conversation in regards to what can be expected of these type of tools in the future, because I think that if the focus is always customer centricity, most of the outcomes are going to be positive, whether it's a short term or in the long term, but you're just going to get better information. You're going to connect people in a better way. And I think that that's extremely important to highlight, because this is a hot topic, that there is a lot of conversation, and we're going to talk about it, I think, after the slide, about you have a positive income, you have a positive outcome, but you also have potentially negative outcome of this. But the idea from what I've learned from you guys, from what I've heard you speak, and you know, reading everything you guys have put out, you guys are trying to improve the experience for people, making it better, making it more reliable, helping spark creativity, making things easier, driving people in the right direction. And I think that that's a great idea. It comes with a great responsibility, of course, because it puts a lot of weight on the system, and it puts a lot of weight, you know, on how the system is managed and covers it. But I think overall, if the core component is that, then the entire experience is better. And if you're an advertiser, you want to be where the experience is the best one, because that's where users are going to be more engaging and they're going to have more chances of buying your product. You want to advertise in a place where you know that users find the information reliable, so you can connect that reliability of the engine to you and your information and your website. And that's why I think that's such an important topic. And you know, just going into it right away, then there's a discussion of, you know, the ethics of AI and the product and what can come out of it, and you know, and the negative impact of it. And I think it's a very interesting discussion. I know you guys take this very seriously as well, and I know that that's also a core component of Bing Chat versus the other engines, and even ChatGPT. You guys, I understand, have more control of the information that feeds the engine, right? Which gives you a bit more control of the outcome, and also allows you to curate the answers a bit more. Is that something that you're actively working on? Is that a core component for you guys? Because I know it's extremely important for most people when they talk about these particular engines.
Yeah, I think those are some of the first questions that a lot of people are asking here internally, right? Well, one, it's like, when can we start playing with it, right? And I think a lot of times we want to make sure it's ready before it goes out. And baking in all these core components it can be tough, right? Especially if it's a learning sort of you know, component here. I think for us, you know, and I'm not involved in these conversations, but I like to participate in the forums that they do. You know, there's a lot of things here that we have to consider, right? Like accountability. Like, let's say the engine gives you an answer and it's sort of, you know, the wrong direction, but that's just because the way it was informed, or that because that's what's available in the open web. You know, who's accountable for that sort of end result, right? So how do we create those kind of, you know, safety measures in there, right? And how do we create the experience relevant so that, again, it's not gaslighting you about your marriage or something? Again, that's a case from a few weeks ago. And then also, how do we tell the users to, you know, behave in a way where they're also not submitting a ton of personal identifying information, right? How do we get folks to only like leverage this as a true co-pilot and not provide proprietary things that, you know, could again be made available somewhere else, right? That sort of digital footprint, we don't know how far it goes because it's so early days. And so I think where we're slow to move sometimes is largely in inserting all these components to make sure that their experience is 100% safe for folks, that it includes this whole package of what makes our network great. And again, brand safety, making sure that we're not putting content next to stuff that doesn't make any sense, or that's offensive, or that, you know, conflicts with the message that we're with the advertiser or with the message. And that we're using relevant information and not pulling back from the open web from, you know, 10 years ago, right? There's parameters there that keep things in a sort of a fresh state. And again, one of the things about the advertising component that it's always been true is that we want to make sure it's relevant to the audience that's searching for it, that we're creating intelligent experiences that make sense and they're seamless for folks when they're looking for that type of information, right? Like I don't think we'd want to put any ads on Excel because it doesn't make any sense, right? And then also, again, sort of thinking about that last example that you showed, somebody has a certain prompt that they put, I have 3 hours, or I'm 3 hours away from Heathrow, I'd love to like take a short trip. You know, we want to make sure that it can provide it something that's relevant. And then when it's prompted to give them, you know, something that's a little bit more sort of tangible and clickable, that the machine knows to provide that, right? And so that's informed technology. And that, again, for us, that anybody who uses us, anybody who plugs into our network to, you know, power their ads, that they have the full transparency of like what's going on in the background, and that you know, we continue to operate on trust, right? That you know, whatever first party data they plug in or whatever first party data is available, that they live separate than our program, right? And that it's designed to supercharge your ads, not designed to inform our technology, you know, to take advantage of something like that, right? And so I think that's the cool thing about where we are now. And, you know, I'd love for this to move faster, but it takes a long time to bake in all these things and to put out a product that everyone's going to love, right? So I'm personally excited. And, you know, I would encourage folks to test this out, especially if you haven't downloaded the Edge browser, do it now. That's a shameless plug. You can do that. We'll provide the links after, but it's a really fun experience. Even, you know, just to sort of help you throughout your day on, you know, summarizing, you know, a conversation or an email or putting an email together. And then also just getting some really good ideas for cooking and trips. So it's just been a really cool experience to see like what it can do. And, you know, one last thing, I think in terms of an efficiency play, in some areas, there's always going to, there in a lot of areas, there's always going to be human touch. So we're not eliminating the human. We just want to supercharge the human. And I think when you're asking to do something, in the worst case scenario, it'll probably take you 50% of the way. And that 50% is 50% further than not doing it all. Right. And so I think that has always been like my pitch, in that it'll help you jumpstart what you want to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think this is a very important topic for advertisers because, you know, as an advertiser, and I speak for a client, you know, they want to make sure that their information is showing in the right places and that, you know, it's being accompanied by information that you can trust and that is relevant to customers. So safety is obviously huge. Another topic, and I think we got a question about this, which is in regards to can this be potentially a disadvantage for professionals in terms of growth or replacing them, or what does this mean? Whether it's ChatGPT or Bing Chat or any of these AI machine learning concepts that we're introducing. I think this is a pretty interesting conversation. Of course, there's a lot of noise around it. The way I personally see it is kind of to think of this as a stage similar to when the computers and the internet came on board. You know, a lot of people probably question and said, so, but if a computer can do what I do, then is this just, you know, am I not going to have a job anymore? Or, you know, if you were doing manual research before and then the internet comes aboard, you say, okay, well, I'm going to be out of a job. And I don't think it's like that. You know, I think that when we talk about these particular tools, if they are customer centric and they help, you know, improve the experience in terms of interaction and engagement, I think it's actually just going to open more opportunities for professionals. Obviously, that comes with adaptation, you know, and flexibility and understanding how you can leverage these tools to make sure that they don't impact your day-to-day job, but rather actually, at least not in a negative way, but rather actually give you a positive boost. And we do it here, you know, at White Shark. We use ChatGPT and Bing Chat for certain things. And, you know, we've tried doing scripts for accounts, you know, we've tried, you know, the tools for doing market research. We've tried you know, for guidance on certain things in regards to content and things like that. What I can tell you from our personal experience is that because it's the very early stage and these are not perfect systems yet, the information is extremely valuable, but the human needs to be there no matter what. There needs to be someone driving, you know, the plane and piloting the plane and making sure that things are working smoothly. But more importantly, I can tell you that when used correctly, what this gives you is just more efficiency in regards to what you do on a day-to-day basis and more time to be more strategical about things. So if before it would take you 3 hours to do market research and now you can do it in half an hour, then you have 2 hours and a half back to be more strategic about what to do with that information. And I think that that's the key component, because regardless of all the advantages that you have from a chatbot in terms of experience and what it can do, there's still a lot of human components that will not be replaced by technology. I'm not even going to say in the short term. I don't think ever. You know, there's a component about being conscious and understanding context that I don't think technology is going to get there anytime soon. So for me, I think in terms of how this can impact, you know, certain positions is if you prepare, if you leverage, if you take advantage, if you educate yourself and understand how you can use them to enhance your capabilities, I think it's actually just going to give you a boost in terms of what you do on a day-to-day, at least for most professions. Just like the computers and the internet did, you know, 20 or 30 years ago. Now, you know, most people have a job that's tied to a computer. Instead of saying, oh, I lost my job and there isn't anything I can do, people adapted and then said, okay, I'm going to use this machine to be more efficient. So I think it's the same concept, but I know it's a hot topic as well. I just think it's a matter of how you approach it and understand. As long as you educate yourself and the more you learn about these things, I think the more you understand how they can be beneficial. But also you understand how important it is to have a human piloting the ship. And the perfect example is SEO content.
Mhm.
If you fully rely on one of these chatbots or machines to write an SEO article, the quality of the article is going to be regular at best. It's not going to replace a human writer. It's not going to understand to that level the style, the context, how they can tell the story about a brand or a particular topic. So I think for now we're safe. I think we're in safe hands. And I think this is for now being a lot of, just a positive push forward rather than something that's going to come and replace, a human doing their job.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier about reinforcing that this is a co-pilot, right? I think it's supercharging a lot more of the processes that you highlighted a couple slides ago. Yeah, we can't work around the clock, but we do have a technology that can support us around the clock, right? So that can, minimize a couple of things that we need to do the next day, all that good stuff. And I think a couple of years ago too, there was a conversation around AI generated art, right? And they were just like, they prompted the AI, can you make me a Rembrandt? And it had all the ridges. It was great. It looked like it was painted by Rembrandt, but ultimately they were like, it looks like a mediocre Rembrandt. Like Rembrandt himself would be like, yeah, this is okay one, right? But like, what's the difference between like making it good and great, right? And that's a human touch, right? And I think you said it with some of these processes. I think it's going to be super important for us to engage with our web properties a little bit more actively, right? So continuing to invest more in SEO property, SEO language, SEM as well, to be more strategic, to see like what else is being, integrated in the tools, so that you can leverage ChatGPT, or leverage some of these tools to write, more dynamic copy. And then also, I think there's just an exciting time there to use this to measure sentiment, use this to measure quality leads, use this to measure a little bit more of what you're already doing at the human level, right? And so it's it's a great time. I think and productivity is going to be. I think there's a new role that was being discussed to be a prompt designer, right? Like we're not even a year old into these integrations, but there's like new roles that are already surfacing up, right? So I think there's opportunities here, rather than sort of Skynet eliminating our jobs.
Yeah, no, for sure. And since you talked about the prompt role, this is something we were discussing, off camera earlier today as well. Is in getting into topic about how this is going to affect advertisers and what they can expect. When you think in terms of prompts, you think about what these type of things can do to advertisers and the way they look for things. And maybe we can start the topic with that. Do you think that, the introduction of Bing Chat in particular, and, as part of the search and now answer engine, is going to change the way people look for things? Because, we're kind of already trained and wired to look for things the way, traditional search engines work today. So a HVAC company near me, that would be the way that I would look for an HVAC company. But is this going to lead people towards searching things in a different way moving forward? Because they know that the engine is conversational and they can get more insight, and that tone now is relevant and context is relevant. Is it going to change the way, potential users of the search engine look for things? And if it does, what does that mean for advertisers? Do we have to change the way we showcase information based on the change of language and the change of the search queries as well? So maybe we can start with that before we jump into the rest of the topics for this particular, because this is a very interesting part, I think, of the equation when we talk about specific advertisers, and what we're doing to showcase information in the Bing platform. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us in our ad copy and how we showcase information?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we had sort of had an experience with this a couple of years ago with voice integration, right? Like the Hey Google, Alexa, and Cortana. I remember I had all three, and every time I had an idea in my head of what I was going to ask the machine, I almost forgot how to speak English or something. I was just like, "Hey, Cortana, bring me," and I sort of, I don't know, something happened with me, like where my brain reset and I couldn't engage anymore. And then it got to a point where I was just barking orders at the thing. I was like, "Hey, Alexa, play this." And I almost felt rude at that point, right? I think we even saw that when we look at the search term reports and things like that, some of those were coming in, and you would see the hey something, and then the rest of the prompt, right? So I think again, as more people start adopting this, we're going to start seeing how people are behaving, and again, I'm sure we're going to start seeing more long tail, sorry, uh, type of prompts, right? And I think in the last examples that we saw, there was a lot of context that was provided in some of these things, right? So that's going to be huge for us, right? Because it may be able to read into something else and provide upselling opportunities or additional products that would accompany maybe that initial point of entry.
And in terms of the content itself, I mean, I see it in a world where now the keywords that we use, now we consider having, keywords with context, which in my mind would probably lead to better results overall, because you're making the experience more precise. Now it's not, you're not that high in the funnel. If you have a specific context and you have a specific answer for it, then it's definitely more likely to be more positive, the experience for the user. So in general terms, I see this as a positive thing, as long as us as advertisers are able to adapt to change. One thing that's come up, and I think there's a question about it, we'll cover in the Q&A section at the end, but people have been asking if there's going to be placing of ads in the chatbot answers. What controls that information? Is it something that is exclusively pulled from the database based on what you guys curate organically, or will advertisers have the possibility of influencing the answers of the chatbot? How is that going to work? Or do you guys have that in the roadmap? And what's the plan with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, again, the core product of the search ads are always going to be, again, the Microsoft owned properties, right? And the places we're integrated. So for us, it's like search isn't going anywhere, right? Like, because, this is a component that's co-piloting. And so we want to make sure that the ads are relevant across the board, right? So like whatever you would serve on at Bing.com, MSN.com, is in line with what you would get if you were to prompt something very close to it, right? So again, the idea is also to include ads, but not to sort of, make it irrelevant where you're constantly getting something when you didn't ask for something specific or contextual. Again, I feel the two examples that we showed when we're talking about like someone with an emergency service, that makes sense because the context is, hey, I don't have any heat in my house, like, and let's say you're in Detroit or in Chicago, like that's an emergency service. But if you're in Los Angeles in the summer and you're like, hey, the same way that like, your AC isn't working, you might, so like in those things, there's built-in context because of the way, some of those verticals are behaving generally from historical data. But in other areas where we're talking about travel and things like that, it might be more contextual, and it might take a little bit more drill down to get there, right? We just want to make sure that you mention, I'll be flying into Heathrow. I want to go somewhere 3 hours away at the furthest. And they're like, here's a hotel, here's a cruise, here's this, like all those things have to play with the experience, right? Because otherwise you're just getting bombarded with something that you didn't ask for and that probably isn't as relevant to what you're trying to get at. So again, we're still in learning phase, and as I start to know more and as I start to release more, we'll have more to share on some of those things, right? But the conversations are already happening. We, from my side, are the voice of the customers a lot of times. So whatever you're seeing or whatever your folks are asking, we are laddering that up to the product team. We've started to have a lot more engagement with those folks, and it's a great time because of the partnership and the investment that Microsoft is making in this.
Yeah, and I think as well, one concept to keep in mind is that regardless of the Bing chatbot taking over a lot of the content that we see out there, most businesses should heavily invest in creating trust with their audience. If you have a website, you have the reviews, you have everything set up correctly, you have the right information, your ad copy is clean, regardless of whether it's through the chatbot or organic searches or paid ads, you're going to show more if you really keep the core of your brand safe and trustworthy for users. You're just going to rank higher altogether, because there's a concern always that if this is going to take over in terms of ad copy space and it's going to replace basically a lot of what the search engine does, then if there's no control over it and someone can pay to show up, then you know the information is at risk. But I think it's important to understand that regardless of the opportunity of putting an ad in Chatbot or not, if you don't comply with everything that needs to happen for you to be a relevant answer for someone, you're not going to show, whether you pay $100 per click, $1,000 per click. You know, the system is built in a way that the experience makes sense and is trustworthy and reliable and positive for the user. So it's not just an open auction either. And with that in mind, I think it's important to understand that even though this is a big change for advertisers, you can't just forget about everything else that you're doing on the side, you know, to make sure that you're telling the right story about your brand and your advertiser's brand, and that you're trying to connect with the right audience. And that's why I think there's a lot more positive to this than any potential negatives, because I see this more as an enhancement of the experience rather than a replacement of anything else, or a new player in town that might disrupt something in a negative way. So but there's a lot of value and potential. You know, we're seeing it on the screen right now when we're talking about this earlier today with the reach, the automation. There's more context. I don't know if you guys are going to provide maybe later down the line more reporting in regards to the behavior of people through the chat, and if that can help advertisers. Do you know anything about that?
I think I want to go back to a point there about not ignoring, you know, sort of like those best practices, right? Like it just makes sense because, again, we're leveraging what's already out there, right? And the other piece is this is, you know, a lot of it's to get ahead of the deprecation of the cookie, right? And so as we start looking at these different channels, everyone's going to need to supercharge them, right? And this integration of ChatGPT is awesome because it's provided another like opportunity for us to engage with the potential searcher. It's going to keep them on longer. It's going to keep them more engaged, and they're going to advocate for folks to also download the product, right? Like that's the idea, is to grow that way, and that's how we grow our influence. So it is, you know, very early days, right? And again, going back to the advertising piece, like this is a key component now, and it's growing our market share. So I don't have any numbers right now to tell you because these things are still very early days, 10 weeks old. But a lot of people who, you know, didn't have Edge browser now have the Edge browser, right? They're starting to play with it a little bit more. And, you know, again, for folks who are looking at their budgets for next quarter or something, and they want to get to relevant reach, we're an advertising network that should not be ignored. You know, like Microsoft Ads is continuing to, you know, grow. And we have a highly relevant audience that's really engaged. And it is one of these places that, you know, if you're strapped on Google and you need to, you're cost conscious and you need to look at maximizing where there's less density, Microsoft can be that option for you, right? And so we're part of that digital marketing mix to get in front of, you know, relevant audiences. And this is just another integration that's growing that market share for us.
Yeah, and you mentioned Edge, which I think is something relevant for users to understand, that if you want to access Bing Chat, you do it through Edge. I gotta come clean and say, I downloaded Edge maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago to start testing this out when you guys announced it, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how far it's come along. And I gotta say it, you know, I gotta be transparent about it. It's a pretty robust and powerful tool. I'm actually using Edge right now to present, and I've been using it on a day-to-day because I'm comparing with my previous browser to see how far I can take it, but I can tell you it's a very clean experience as well. It sounds like a joke right now, but I think it also talks about the ecosystem that you guys are working on, because it's important to not forget that Bing Chat is part of something else. Bing Chat is just one more component into what you guys are investing on in terms of AI, because I know what you guys are doing with Office. I know what you guys are doing with Outlook. And I can see that that's also coming with Edge as well. So for anyone watching, if obviously if you want to give it a shot for Bing Chat, then obviously you're going to download Edge. But even if you're not going to try Bing Chat, I would recommend that you try Edge because it's a pretty powerful browser. I was pleasantly surprised. You guys have a flawless integration with other browsers, so you can pull out your favorites and all of that. That's great. That didn't exist before, so that's a game changer for me. But it's a pretty good experience, and I think that that's the whole component here about experience, improving the experience for the users, making sure that it works, and making sure that everything else is tied to the chat and to the experience is smooth as well. So, so yeah, we have 3 minutes left, and I have 3 great questions. So before wrapping up, I do want to cover those questions, Mauricio, because I think that they are pretty good for this topic. I'm going to start with the first one before we wrap up. Okay. What implications does Bing Chat or chat search have on the SEO industry? The days of a list of potential sites that can answer the query is now replaced with the answer, which is coming from the chatbot. in this new world, how does a company get any search traffic if they aren't the highest ranked site for the query? And this is a great question.
Yeah, that's a great, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, because things are very early days, right? It is leveraging what's already out there. And so I think we want to continue to encourage the best practices, and we want to encourage folks to think maybe differently, right? Like be an authority in your space. You know, I've done talks with White Shark in front of, you know, certain audiences where they would talk about you know, people being experts in their field and also recommending their competition. And it was driving a lot of traffic to their site because they were seen as sort of impartial in that space. That was really cool back then. It was innovative. I think we just need to keep challenging the industry to think a little differently, how you keep people on your website, how you provide relevant information for people searching for maybe like unique components of your product or unique value propositions or case studies that surface relevancy, right? That speak to the reputation, to speak to the quality of the product, right? So I think it's going to be a really unique and sort of challenging time for SEO specialists, but I think I'm also excited to see like what else we're going to do to push the envelope there. Because again, the data they're using is from the open web.
Yeah, so I think as long as, again, the content is geared towards relevance and improving the experience, I'm pretty sure you guys down the line are going to, you know, share a lot more information in regards to how you can have more influence on the answers. So I think advertisers are still, at least SEO, through SEO, you're going to have a chance to increase your ranking and show up. You're just going to have to work differently with the information and how you put it out there. The second question that I have is, will ad inventory decrease significantly? And what implications is that going to have for advertisers?
Ad inventory decrease? No, it's going to go up. It's, again, because we're seeing a lot more folks use this product, right? So we're getting, you know, net new users who weren't, you know, Microsoft, you know, Bing users before or Edge users before, right? So in essence, we're going to have more marketplace share. Like that's just the play for us. And again, it's part of the suite, right? So we're not just Bing.com. Like that's not the only space that the ads show. We show in a couple different places, and this is just another piece of that full arsenal.
Perfect. And then the last question, I think we're right on time, so we're going to get this one through. Is Bing Chat using the latest version of ChatGPT data, or is it using the data from the free ChatGPT version? And this is a good one because I asked you this off camera as well.
Yeah, so we used ChatGPT 4. We're on Prometheus, and again, the data they're using is the open web from I think 2 years ago is the latest. But yeah, I mean, in terms of information that's being, you know, sort of uploaded and things like that, I think what lives on ChatGPT on its own and the license that's there is its own, and the items that we have are leveraging a lot of what is Microsoft. So that's kind of the separate worlds, right? And we want to make sure that they're two separate products and they're not marrying, you know, or sort of cross-pollinating anything there.
Perfect. And I think we are right on time, Mauricio. So I want to thank you. Yeah, we did it. I want to thank you for joining us today. I think this was a very fun one. I'm very fond of this particular topic. I think we could do probably 3 or 4 of these, and we might, you know, maybe we'll do one in a month with all the changes. But thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. If you have any more questions or anything else that you'd like to discuss that we weren't able to cover today, please feel free to reach out to either Mauricio or myself. Either way, you're going to get a copy of the deck and the recording to your email if you subscribe. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
Good to see you guys. Take care, everyone.